When did something you laughed off come back to haunt you? When I was 17, this kid named Dimitri in my AP history class developed what I thought was a harmless crush on me. It started small. He'd save me a seat, offer to carry my books, and always volunteered to be my partner for group projects. Dimitri was quiet, had thick glasses, and wore the same 3 oversized sweaters in rotation. He reminded me of a lost puppy, eager to please but completely clueless about social cues. My friends thought it was hilarious. "Your stalker's here," my best friend Quinn would whisper when Dimitri approached our lunch table. I'd roll my eyes and laugh it off. He wasn't a stalker, just an awkward teenager with a crush. I'd been there myself. The first real red flag came during prom season. Dimitri appeared at my locker with a handmade poster asking me to be his date. It was covered in glitter and had our names written in calligraphy surrounded by hearts. Sweet, but completely over the top. "That's really thoughtful," I said gently. "But I'm already going with someone." I wasn't. I just didn't want to hurt his feelings with the truth that going to prom with him would be social suicide. His face crumpled. "But we're perfect for each other. I know everything about you." Something in his tone made me uncomfortable, but I brushed it off. Teenage boys said dramatic things when they were rejected. I'd forget about it by graduation. I was wrong. After that, Dimitri's behavior shifted. He'd show up wherever I was, the library, coffee shops, even my part-time job at the bookstore. When I'd spot him lurking behind the fiction section, he'd duck away like he was just browsing. He's harmless, I told myself, just shy and socially awkward. Graduation came and went. I was headed to college 3 states away, excited for a fresh start. Dimitri was going to the local community college. Our paths would naturally diverge, or so I thought. During my freshman orientation week, I found a letter slipped under my dorm room door. My name was written in familiar calligraphy. Inside, Dimitri had written a 3-page love letter explaining how he'd followed his heart and transferred to my university. He'd somehow found out my dorm and room number. My roommate Zara read it over my shoulder. "This is creepy as hell," she said. "He transferred schools to follow you?" I laughed nervously. "It's just coincidence. This is a good school." But deep down, I knew better. The next morning, Dimitri was waiting outside my dorm with coffee and a croissant from my favorite cafe back home. He'd driven 6 hours to bring me breakfast from a place I'd mentioned once, casually, in AP history. "How did you know where I lived?" I asked. "I asked around," he said, beaming. "I wanted to surprise you." That's when I realized this wasn't going away. For the next 2 months, Dimitri inserted himself into my college life. He'd appear at parties I mentioned on social media. He joined clubs I was in. He even switched his major to match mine, English literature, despite having no apparent interest in reading. When I started dating Trevor, a guy from my Victorian literature seminar, Dimitri's behavior escalated. I'd find him sitting across from us in the cafeteria, staring. When Trevor walked me back to my dorm, Dimitri would be there, pretending to study on a bench outside. Once, I caught him taking pictures of us with his phone. "You need to talk to campus security," Zara urged. "And say what? That a classmate has a crush on me?" I shrugged it off. "He's never actually threatened me." I should have listened to her. The breaking point came during finals week of freshman year. I was alone in the library's basement level, cramming for my Shakespeare exam, when Dimitri appeared beside my table. "We need to talk," he said. His usual nervous energy was gone. He sat down without being invited, his eyes fixed on mine with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "Trevor's all wrong for you," he said calmly. "I've been watching, and he doesn't appreciate you the way I do." "Dimitri, you need to stop. I know you think I'm just some weird kid from high school," he interrupted. "But I'm not going anywhere. I've rearranged my entire life for you. I'll keep rearranging it until you understand we're meant to be together." He reached across the table and grabbed my hand. His palm was sweaty, his grip surprisingly strong. "I know where you eat, where you study, where you live. I know your class schedule better than you do. I know Trevor walks you home every Tuesday and Thursday. I know your roommate goes to her boyfriend's place on weekends." My blood turned to ice. "I know you're alone right now," he whispered. I yanked my hand away and stood up so fast my chair toppled backward. The crash echoed through the empty basement, but no one was around to hear it. "Stay away from me," I said, my voice shaking. Dimitri smiled, the first genuine smile I'd ever seen from him. It was terrifying. "Or what?" he asked. "You'll tell campus security that a fellow student tried to have a conversation with you?" He was right. He hadn't technically done anything illegal. Creepy? Absolutely. Criminal? Not yet. I grabbed my books and ran for the stairs, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Behind me, I heard Dimitri's voice, calm and patient. "I'll be here when you're ready to talk." That night, I told Trevor everything. He was furious, not just at Dimitri, but at me for not taking it seriously sooner. "This guy has been stalking you for months," he said, pacing my dorm room. "And you just laughed it off?" "I didn't think." "That's the problem. You didn't think." He stopped pacing and looked at me. "Promise me you'll never go anywhere alone." I promised. For 2 weeks, Trevor or Zara accompanied me everywhere. I changed my routines, took different routes to class, and avoided the library basement entirely. I thought maybe Dimitri had gotten the message. Then the gifts started. I'd find them on my desk after class. Small things at first. A bookmark with my initials, a packet of my favorite tea, a USB drive containing every photo he'd taken of me since high school, including ones I didn't remember him taking. The USB drive was what finally convinced me to contact campus security. Officer Patricia Romero was in her 50s with kind eyes and the demeanor of someone who'd seen everything. She listened to my story without judgment, taking detailed notes. "Has he made any direct threats?" she asked. "Not exactly," I admitted. "But he said he knows my schedule, where I live." "That's not technically a threat under university policy," she said gently. but I can have a talk with him. Make it clear that his behavior is inappropriate. She called him in the next day. When I saw Dimitri afterward, he was smiling again. Productive meeting, he said as he passed me on the quad. Officer Romero thinks we just need to communicate better. My stomach dropped. What does that mean? She suggested we work out our differences like adults. He paused. Maybe grab coffee sometime. That evening, Officer Romero called me into her office. I spoke with Dmitry Volkov, she said. He seems like a nice young man. A bit shy, maybe socially awkward, but harmless. He said you two had a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He explained that you're friends from high school, and he's been trying to reconnect. He said you might have misinterpreted his friendliness as something more aggressive. That's not what happened. Look, Officer Romero leaned forward. I've dealt with real stalking cases. This doesn't fit the pattern. No threats, no violence, no property damage. Just an awkward young man with a crush. She handed me a pamphlet about campus counseling services. Maybe talking to someone about anxiety might help you process this situation more clearly. I left her office feeling more alone than ever. Even the person whose job it was to protect students thought I was overreacting. Summer break couldn't come fast enough. I went home to work at my old bookstore job, hoping 3 months away would give Dimitri time to move on. It didn't. The first letter arrived 2 weeks into summer, then another, and another. They came every few days, each one longer and more detailed than the last. Dimitri wrote about his summer internship at a law firm. He'd switched majors again, this time to pre-law. He wrote about the apartment he'd rented off campus for sophomore year. He wrote about how much he missed me. The letters escalated from affectionate to possessive to angry. In one, he accused me of leading him on. In another, he detailed how Trevor was obviously using me. The final letter of the summer was 3 pages of him explaining why we were soulmates, complete with a detailed timeline of our relationship dating back to junior year of high school. I saved every letter, photographed them, and created a file. If campus security wouldn't take me seriously based on awkward conversations, maybe documentation would help. When I returned for sophomore year, I requested a room change. The housing office said none were available, but they could move me to a different floor of the same dorm. It felt like a compromise that solved nothing. Dimitri was waiting for me on move-in day. He'd changed over the summer, gained muscle, updated his wardrobe, and traded his thick glasses for contacts. He looked like a completely different person, but his eyes were the same. That intense, unsettling stare that made me feel like prey. You look beautiful, he said, blocking my path to the dorm entrance. I missed you. Move, I said. I know you got my letters. We need to discuss them. There's nothing to discuss. He stepped closer. I think there is. That's when Trevor appeared, returning from his summer job. He took one look at the situation and positioned himself between us. Problem here? Trevor asked. Dimitri smiled. No problem. Just catching up with an old friend. She doesn't look like she wants to catch up. This doesn't concern you, Dimitri said, his voice hardening. Actually, it does. For a moment, I thought they might fight. Then Dimitri stepped back, hands raised in mock surrender. Another time, he said to me, when you're alone. That night, I found a new letter under my door. This one was different, shorter, angrier. It accused me of turning people against him. It said Trevor was poisoning my mind. It ended with a promise that he would fix this situation permanently. I took the letter straight to Officer Romero. She read it twice, frowning. This is more concerning, she admitted. The phrase fix this situation permanently could be interpreted as a threat. Could be interpreted? It is a threat. I'll bring him in again, give him a formal warning. And if he doesn't stop, then we'll explore other options. Dimitri's second meeting with campus security went differently than the first. He emerged angry, his usual fake smile replaced by a cold stare. When he saw me later that day, he didn't approach. He just watched. That was somehow worse. For 3 weeks, he kept his distance physically but ramped up everything else. He'd sit where I could see him in the cafeteria staring while I ate. He'd walk past my classes as they ended, timing it perfectly. He'd be in the library whenever I was, always in my peripheral vision. He wasn't breaking any rules, but he was making it impossible for me to forget his presence. Then, Trevor got jumped. It happened on a Thursday night after his intramural basketball game. 3 guys in hoodies cornered him in the parking lot behind the gym. They didn't take his wallet or phone. They just beat him up and left him there. Trevor spent 2 nights in the hospital with a concussion and 3 broken ribs. Did you see their faces? I asked when he was lucid enough to talk. No, he said painfully, but one of them knew my name, called me Trevor the hero while they kicked me. We both knew who was behind it, but we couldn't prove anything. Dimitri had been at a study group that night, with witnesses. When I visited Trevor the next day, Dimitri was in the hospital cafeteria. He waved when he saw me, as if his presence there was completely innocent. Terrible what happened to Trevor, he said when I confronted him. Random violence is so senseless. You did this. I was studying. Ask anyone in my study group. He pulled out his phone and showed me a group selfie timestamped during the attack. But you're right to be concerned about his safety, Dimitri continued. Maybe he should be more careful about who he's protecting. That was the closest thing to a direct threat he'd ever made. I went straight to Officer Romero with the information about Trevor's attack. She listened, but her response was predictable. Without evidence connecting Dimitri to the assault, there's nothing I can do. Campus security can't investigate based on suspicion alone. He threatened Trevor. He expressed concern about safety. That's not the same thing. I wanted to scream. Trevor recovered physically, but the attack changed him. He became hypervigilant, constantly looking over his shoulder. He started questioning whether our relationship was worth the danger. Maybe we should take a break, he said one evening as we studied in my room. Until this situation resolves itself. You're letting him win. I'm trying to stay alive. He touched his still bandaged ribs. Next time might be worse. I knew he was right, but it felt like abandoning a sinking ship. After Trevor and I broke up, Dimitri's behavior shifted again. The stalking continued, but now it came with an undercurrent of smugness. He'd gotten what he wanted. Trevor out of the picture. The gifts resumed. Flowers appeared on my desk. Love poems showed up in my textbooks. Once I found my favorite coffee waiting for me in the exact spot I always sat in the library. Zara finally convinced me to involve my parents. "You can't handle this alone anymore," she said. "This guy is escalating." Dad was furious when I told him everything. He wanted to drive up immediately and have a conversation with Dimitri. Mom was more practical. She contacted a lawyer. The lawyer, Ms. Helena Vargas, specialized in stalking cases. She reviewed my documentation and was the first person to take me seriously without reservation. "You have a clear pattern of unwanted contact," she said during our consultation. "The gifts, letters, and surveillance behavior combined with the implied threats create grounds for a restraining order." Finally, someone who understood. We filed for a temporary protective order that Friday. Dimitri was served with papers on Monday, prohibiting him from contacting me or coming within 100 yards of me. For 48 hours, I felt relief for the first time in months. Then he violated it. I was walking to my Victorian literature class when I saw him waiting outside the building. When he spotted me, he didn't approach. He just stood there, smiling. Technically, he was about 105 yards away, just outside the restraining order boundary, but he was there, waiting. I called campus security immediately. When they arrived, Dimitri had moved even further away, now clearly beyond the restricted distance. "He's not violating the order," Officer Romero said after measuring the distance. "He's actually being quite careful to stay within legal bounds." That's when I realized how smart Dimitri actually was. He'd always been careful to stay just within legal boundaries while maximizing psychological impact. The harassment continued, but now it was more sophisticated. He'd follow me at exactly 101 yards. He'd show up at places I frequented, but always maintain the required distance. He'd send letters to my parents' house instead of my dorm. The restraining order only covered direct contact with me. My parents forwarded the letters to Ms. Vargas. In them, Dimitri painted himself as the victim of an unstable woman who'd misinterpreted his innocent romantic interest. He claimed I was harassing him with false accusations and legal action. "He's trying to establish a paper trail," Ms. Vargas explained. "If this ever goes to court, he wants documentation showing you as the aggressor." The psychological warfare was working. I stopped sleeping well. My grades suffered. I lost weight and became jumpy around unexpected sounds. Every shadow could be Dimitri watching me. The breaking point came during spring semester of sophomore year. I was working late in the art building's ceramics studio, trying to finish a sculpture for class. The building was mostly empty. Art students were notorious night owls, but it was past midnight even for us. I was alone, focused on my work, when I heard footsteps in the hallway. They stopped outside the studio. I looked up to see Dimitri standing in the doorway. He was holding a bouquet of roses and wearing a suit, as if he was dressed for a date. "You're violating the restraining order," I said, reaching for my phone. "Actually, I'm not." He stepped into the room but stayed near the door. "I'm here for a legitimate educational purpose. I'm auditing an art class." I looked around the studio. My phone showed 12:47 a.m. No classes were in session. "That's obviously a lie. Prove it." He smiled and set the roses on a table near the door. "I brought these as an apology for all the misunderstandings." My hands were covered in clay, and he was between me and the only exit. "What do you want?" I asked. "To talk, finally, without lawyers and campus security and well-meaning friends interfering." He moved closer, still maintaining what was probably exactly 100 yards, the distance he'd clearly memorized. "I know you think I'm some kind of monster," he said, "but I'm not. I'm just someone who loves you more than anyone else ever could. That's not love. That's obsession." "What's the difference?" He tilted his head. "I've rearranged my entire life around you. Changed schools, changed majors, changed everything about myself to be worthy of you. If that's not love, what is? Love respects boundaries. Love accepts no for an answer. You've never actually said no. Not really. You've said not now, and this isn't appropriate, and I'm seeing someone else. But you've never looked me in the eye and said you don't want me." He took another step closer. "So say it now. Look me in the eye and tell me you feel nothing for me. Tell me you want me completely out of your life. Say it, and I'll disappear forever." I stared at him, searching for any hint of sincerity. All I saw was the same intensity that had terrified me for 2 years. "I don't want you in my life," I said clearly. "I want you to leave me alone, forever." His smile never wavered. "I don't believe you." That's when I realized this conversation was never going to end the way I hoped. Dimitri wasn't looking for closure or acceptance of rejection. He was looking for something I couldn't give him, validation of a fantasy that existed only in his mind. I grabbed a ceramic tool from my workstation, a sharp wooden implement used for carving clay. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it was something. "Stay back," I warned. "You're not going to hurt me," he said confidently. "You're not violent. I know you. You don't know me at all. I know you better than anyone. I know you prefer tea to coffee. I know you bite your lip when you're nervous. I know you write in the margins of books even though you know you shouldn't. I know you cry during sad movies even when you're trying not to. I know you— Stop. I know you're scared right now, but you don't need to be. I would never hurt you. You already have hurt me. For 2 years, you've made my life hell. I've made your life interesting. Before me, you were just another pretty girl coasting through college. I gave you purpose. I gave you a story worth telling. The narcissism was breathtaking. You gave me trauma. I gave you love." I heard footsteps in the hallway. Someone else was in the building. I opened my mouth to scream for help, but Dimitri moved faster than I expected. He crossed the room in 3 quick steps and clamped his hand over my mouth. "Don't," he whispered. We're not finished talking. His hand smelled like chloroform. My vision started to blur around the edges. The last thing I remembered was the ceramic tool falling from my numb fingers and shattering on the floor. I woke up in darkness. My head felt like it was wrapped in cotton and my mouth was dry as sand. I tried to move and realized my hands were zip-tied behind my back. My feet were bound too. I was lying on what felt like a mattress in a room that smelled like dust and old paint. As my eyes adjusted, I could make out shapes in the darkness. A small window near the ceiling showed a rectangle of gray sky, boxes stacked along the walls. A basement maybe, or a storage room. You're awake. Dimitri's voice came from somewhere across the room. I turned my head and saw him sitting in a chair watching me. Where are we? I asked. My voice came out as a croak. Somewhere safe, where we can finally talk without interruption. I tested the restraints. The zip ties were tight but not cutting off circulation. My ceramic tool skills had taught me something about knots and tension. These might be escapable if I could find the right angle. How long have I been here? About 6 hours. I needed time to prepare. The gray light from the window was brightening. Dawn, maybe? Which meant people would be looking for me soon. I'd been supposed to meet Zara for breakfast at 8 a.m. People will notice I'm missing. I know. That's why we need to resolve this quickly. He stood up and moved closer. In the dim light, I could see he'd changed clothes. Instead of the suit, he wore jeans and a dark sweater. Planning clothes. Practical clothes. Resolve what? Our situation. You keep insisting we don't belong together, but you're not thinking clearly. Too many outside influences. Too much pressure from people who don't understand what we have. We don't have anything. We have everything. A shared history. Common interests. Compatible personalities. Intellectual connection. Sexual tension. Sexual tension? I couldn't hide my disgust. Don't pretend you haven't felt it. The way you look at me when you think I'm not watching. The way you respond to my gifts. The way you react when I'm close to you. That's not attraction. That's fear. Same physiological response. Elevated heart rate, heightened awareness, flushed skin. Your body knows what your mind won't admit. He knelt beside the mattress. I've been patient. I've been gentle. I've given you space and time to come to your senses. But patience has limits. I scooted away from him as much as the restraints allowed. What do you want? I want you to stop fighting this. Stop pretending you don't feel what I feel. Stop letting other people convince you that love is supposed to be easy and comfortable and safe. Love isn't supposed to be terrifying. The best love is terrifying. It consumes you. It changes everything about your life. It makes you do things you never thought you'd do. Like kidnapping someone, I thought but didn't say. Great love requires great sacrifice, he continued. I've sacrificed everything for you. Now it's your turn. What kind of sacrifice? Your old life. Your resistance to us. Your need to control everything. He reached out and touched my cheek. I flinched away, but there was nowhere to go. I'm going to untie you now, he said. But first I need you to understand something. We're miles from campus. No one knows where you are. Even if you ran, you wouldn't get far. But you're not going to run because you're finally ready to listen. Dimitri, shh. He placed a finger against my lips. No more arguments. No more protests. Just listen to what your heart is telling you. He reached behind me and I felt the zip ties loosen. Blood rushed back into my hands, bringing painful pins and needles. Sit up, he said. I struggled into a sitting position, my arms weak from being restrained. The room spun slightly. Whatever he'd used to drug me was still in my system. Better? He asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Good. Now, let's start over. Hi, I'm Dimitri. I'm completely in love with you and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making you happy. You can't force someone to love you. I'm not forcing anything. I'm creating the right environment for natural feelings to develop, away from outside pressure and misguided friends. You mean isolation and Stockholm Syndrome? His expression hardened. I mean giving us a real chance. You've never given us a real chance. Because I don't want to date you. I've never wanted to date you. That's not outside pressure, that's just my choice. Your choice is based on incomplete information. You don't really know me. I know enough. You know the awkward high school version of me. You don't know who I've become, who I became for you. He gestured to himself. I learned to dress better. I got contacts. I started working out. I changed my major 3 times to match your interests. I became someone worthy of you. I never asked you to change. You didn't have to ask. That's what love is. Becoming the best version of yourself for another person. I realized there was no reasoning. In his mind, he'd created an entire narrative where his stalking was romance, and my fear was coyness. Any evidence to the contrary was just outside interference. What happens now? I asked. Now we get to know each other. Really know each other. Without pretense or performance or other people's expectations. For how long? As long as it takes. And if I never feel what you want me to feel? His smile faltered for the first time. You will. When you see how good we are together. When you see how much I love you. When you understand that no one will ever love you the way I do. That's not an answer. It's the only answer that matters. He stood up and walked to a small table I hadn't noticed before. On it were bottles of water, energy bars, and what looked like a first aid kit. I know you must be hungry, he said, and thirsty. I brought supplies. I'm not eating anything you give me. It's not drugged. I only used chloroform to bring you here safely. From now on, everything I do will be with your full awareness and consent. Consent? I almost laughed. Nothing about this involves consent. You'll see it differently once you adjust to the situation. He brought me a bottle of water and an energy bar. My throat was painfully dry, but I didn't trust anything from him. Suit yourself, he said when I didn't take them. But dehydration won't help you think clearly. I watched him eat an energy bar from the same package and drink from a bottle of water that looked identical to the one he'd offered me. Either they weren't drugged, or he was committed enough to drug himself too. After 15 minutes with no obvious effects on him, I accepted the water. My thirst overrode my caution. Better? He asked as I drank. It was better. The water helped clear some of the fog from the chloroform. Where exactly are we? I asked. A storage unit. I've been renting it since the beginning of sophomore year. Preparing. Preparing for what? For this. For when you finally needed to see the truth without distractions. I looked around more carefully. The boxes along the walls weren't random storage. They were organized, labeled. One was marked photos. Another said gifts returned. A third was labeled research. What's in the boxes? Our history. Everything I've collected about you. About us. Show me. He hesitated. You're not ready yet. Too much too fast might overwhelm you. I want to see what you think you know about me. After a long moment, he walked to the box labeled photos and brought it over. Inside were hundreds of pictures. Printed photos, not just digital files. Pictures of me from high school that I'd never seen before. Pictures of me at college. Walking to class. Studying in the library. Eating in the cafeteria. Sleeping in my dorm room. Sleeping in my dorm room. How did you get these? I asked, holding up a photo that had clearly been taken through my window. I'm resourceful. You broke into my room. I never broke anything. Your window doesn't lock properly. Building maintenance really should fix that. I kept flipping through the photos. There were hundreds of them, dating back to junior year of high school. In some, I was clearly unaware of being photographed. In others, I was looking directly at the camera with an expression of fear or anger. At the bottom of the box was a photo that made my blood freeze. It was taken the night Trevor was attacked. In it, Trevor was on the ground, surrounded by 3 figures in hoodies. The photo was taken from a distance, but it was clear enough to identify Trevor and obvious enough to prove someone had been watching the assault. You were there, I said. I was protecting my investment. Your investment? I couldn't let them kill him, just rough him up enough to send a message. I stared at the photo. You hired them. I provided guidance about appropriate levels of force. The casual way he said it made me feel sick. You could have stopped it. I did stop it. They were supposed to break his legs. I modified the plan when I realized he might not recover fully from that level of injury. He said it like he deserved credit for limiting the violence he'd ordered. Why? Because he was in our way. And because I needed you to see that I could protect you from anything, even the consequences of defying me. The manipulation was staggering. He'd orchestrated Trevor's attack, then positioned himself as my protector against the very violence he'd caused. You're insane. I'm in love. Sometimes the two look similar to people who don't understand the depths of real passion. I set the photos aside and looked toward the door, a heavy metal one with multiple locks. Don't, Dimitri said, following my gaze. There's nowhere to run, and I'd rather not restrain you again. Someone will find me. Eventually, maybe, but not quickly. This facility is in an industrial area. No foot traffic. The nearest occupied building is half a mile away. He sat back down in his chair. Besides, you don't really want to leave yet. You're finally getting answers to questions you've had for years. The only question I have is how to get away from you. See? You're not thinking clearly yet. You should be asking why I love you, what I see in you that no one else has ever seen, what our life together could look like. I don't want to know any of that. Because you're scared. Because you've been conditioned to think of love as something safe and predictable. But real love isn't safe, it's transformative. It demands everything from you. That's not love, that's possession. What's the difference, really? When you love someone completely, you want to possess them completely. You want to be the center of their universe the way they're the center of yours. I realized I needed to change tactics. Direct confrontation wasn't working. It just gave him more opportunities to explain his twisted logic. Maybe I could find a way to manipulate the situation myself. You're right, I said quietly. His expression changed immediately. What? I said you're right. Maybe I haven't been thinking clearly. Suspicion flickered across his face. What changed your mind? The photos. Seeing everything you've done for me. The planning. The dedication. No one's ever cared about me that much. It was the hardest thing I'd ever said. But his posture relaxed slightly. I knew you'd understand eventually. It's just, this is a lot to process. Being here, seeing all this evidence of your feelings, I need time to adjust my thinking. Of course. That's why I brought supplies for several days. Several days. My heart sank, but I kept my expression neutral. Can you tell me about the other boxes? I want to understand the full scope of your feelings. He lit up like a child on Christmas morning. Really? Really? He jumped up and went to the box labeled research. Inside were manila folders with detailed information about my family, my friends, my professors, my medical records, my financial aid information, and my academic history. How did you get my medical records? I have a friend who works in student health services. She thinks I'm your boyfriend, and you asked me to pick up your allergy medication information. Every violation felt worse than the last. And my financial aid information? I work part-time in the registrar's office now. It's amazing how much access student employees have to confidential information. He'd systematically infiltrated every aspect of my life while maintaining the pretense of being a lovesick teenager. This must have taken incredible planning, I said, hoping flattery might lower his guard further. 2 years of careful preparation. I started the summer after graduation, when I realized this wasn't just a high school crush. What made you realize that? I couldn't stop thinking about you. I'd dream about you every night. I'd imagine conversations we might have, dates we might go on, the life we could build together. And when you followed me to college, that's when I knew for certain. I was willing to give up everything I'd planned for my life just to be near you. That's not infatuation. That's destiny. I nodded as if this made perfect sense. I can see that now. But Dimitri, I need you to be honest with me about something. Anything. What's your plan for the long term? We can't stay here forever. His expression grew thoughtful. I've been considering several options. The ideal scenario is that you come to understand your feelings for me over the next few days. and we leave here together as a couple. And if that doesn't happen, it will happen. But hypothetically, if it took longer than expected, I have plans for relocating us somewhere more permanent. Relocating where? I've been researching remote properties, places where we could live simply and focus on each other without outside interference. He was talking about disappearing completely, taking me to some isolated location where no one would ever find me. That sounds romantic, I lied. Like a honeymoon that never ends. Exactly. Just the two of us, learning to love each other without society's constraints. What about our family? Our education? Those are temporary attachments. What we have is eternal. I needed to get out of here before he decided to move to phase 2 of his plan. I'm starting to see the appeal, I said. But I'm also overwhelmed. Could I have some time alone to process everything? I don't think that's a good idea. You might start overthinking again. I promise I won't. I just need a few minutes to absorb what you've shown me, to really understand what you're offering. He studied my face for a long moment. Okay, but just a few minutes, and I'll be right outside the door. That's fine. He gathered up the photos and files, returning them to their boxes. Then he moved toward the door. Don't do anything foolish, he said. Remember, there's nowhere to run. The door closed behind him with a solid thunk. I heard multiple locks engaging from the outside. I waited 30 seconds, then started examining the room more carefully. The walls were concrete block, no way to break through them. The ceiling was low, maybe 8 feet, with exposed ductwork and pipes. The small window was at least 10 feet up and looked too narrow for me to fit through even if I could reach it. But the ductwork gave me an idea. I dragged the chair Dmitry had been sitting in over to the wall below the largest vent. It was just wide enough for me to fit through, and it appeared to run horizontally toward what might be another storage unit. I climbed onto the chair and examined the vent cover. It was held in place by 4 screws, but they looked old and loose. I tried turning one with my fingernails, and it moved slightly. I looked around for something to use as a screwdriver. The only metal object in the room was the water bottle cap, thin enough to fit into the screw slots. It took agonizing minutes to work the first screw loose, constantly listening for Dmitry's return. The second screw came out faster. The third was stubborn, but eventually gave way. The fourth screw was so loose it practically fell out on its own. The vent cover came free with a soft scraping sound. I hoisted myself up and into the ductwork. It was a tight fit, but I could crawl forward on my elbows and knees. The metal was cold and sharp-edged, and every movement seemed impossibly loud. After about 20 feet, I reached another vent. Through the slats, I could see another storage unit, this one filled with furniture and boxes. No Dmitry in sight. I worked this vent cover loose from the inside, which was harder than the first one. When it finally came free, I lowered myself down into the new space as quietly as possible. This unit's door was locked from the inside with a simple deadbolt. I turned it and cracked the door open. The corridor outside was empty. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and I could see other storage unit doors stretching in both directions. Exit signs pointed toward the main entrance. I stepped into the corridor and started moving toward the exit, staying close to the wall and listening for any sound of Dmitry. I'd made it halfway to the exit when I heard his voice behind me. That was impressive. I turned to see him standing at the entrance to the unit I'd escaped from. He was smiling, not angry, but almost proud. I underestimated your resourcefulness, he said. I like that about you. I ran. The exit was maybe 50 yards away, but Dmitry was faster than me and had longer legs. I could hear his footsteps gaining ground as I sprinted down the corridor. I reached the exit door and shoved it open, bursting into gray morning light. The storage facility was surrounded by a chain-link fence, but the gate was open. Beyond it was an industrial street with warehouses and loading docks. I could see a main road in the distance with what looked like traffic. Dmitry caught up to me just as I reached the fence. He grabbed my arm and spun me around. Enough, he said firmly. You've had your fun. Now we're going back. Help! I screamed toward the main road. Someone help me! No one can hear you from here, Dmitry said. And even if they could, what would you tell them? That your boyfriend is trying to take you home after a fight? He was right. From a distance, we probably looked like a couple having a disagreement. I'll tell them you kidnapped me. With what proof? You're not restrained. You're not obviously injured. It's your word against mine. I tried to pull free, but his grip was firm. Besides, he continued, running away just proves you're not thinking clearly yet. We need more time. He started pulling me back toward the storage unit. That's when I saw the security camera. It was mounted on a pole near the facility's office, pointed directly at the entrance. If it was recording, it would have captured me running out and Dmitry pursuing me. The camera, I said, pointing. Dmitry followed my gaze and his expression darkened. Shit. He looked around quickly, calculating. In the distance, I could see a security guard walking toward us from the office. Is everything okay out here? The guard called. This was my chance. He kidnapped me, I shouted before Dmitry could respond. I was in storage unit 247. He's been holding me against my will. The guard stopped walking and reached for his radio. Dmitry's grip on my arm tightened. She's having a mental health crisis, he called to the guard. I'm trying to get her help. I'm not crazy, I yelled. Check the cameras. You'll see him dragging me back. The guard spoke into his radio, then started walking toward us more quickly. Dmitry looked between the guard and the camera, then back at me. This isn't over, he said quietly. Then he ran. He released my arm and sprinted toward the back of the facility, where the fence met a wooded area. Within seconds, he disappeared into the trees. The security guard reached me as I collapsed to my knees, shaking from adrenaline and relief. Are you hurt? He asked. I don't think so, but he drugged me last night, and there's evidence in the storage unit. Photos, files, everything. The guard called the police while staying with me. Within 10 minutes, I could hear sirens approaching. The next few hours were a blur of statements and evidence collection. The police found Dmitry's storage unit exactly as I'd described it. full of photos, personal information, and detailed plans for what he called our relocation. They also found something I hadn't seen, a folder labeled contingency plans. Inside were detailed maps of remote properties in 3 different states, fake identification documents with both our names, and instructions for living off the grid. He'd been planning to disappear me permanently. Detective Ray Martinez, who took my statement, said it was one of the most sophisticated stalking cases he'd seen. This level of planning and documentation is unusual, he said. Most stalkers are impulsive. This guy was methodical. Is he going to prison? If we catch him. Right now, we've issued warrants for kidnapping, stalking, and assault, the attack on your boyfriend. But he's in the wind. My parents drove up that afternoon. Mom cried when she saw me. Dad wanted to organize a manhunt. The FBI is involved now, Detective Martinez assured them. With his level of obsession, he'll likely try to contact her again. When he does, we'll be ready. I spent the next week at my parents' house, giving additional statements and working with federal agents to understand the full scope of Dimitri's surveillance network. They discovered he'd been using social media tracking, GPS monitoring through compromised apps, and even physical surveillance devices. He'd placed a small camera in my dorm room that I'd never noticed. He'd been watching me sleep, study, and change clothes for months. The violations felt endless. 3 weeks later, they caught him. He'd been hiding in his parents' basement, still monitoring my social media accounts and planning his next move. When agents raided the house, they found even more evidence, including detailed plans for breaking me out of protective custody. He'd never intended to give up. The trial took 8 months. Dimitri's defense team tried to paint him as a confused young man whose romantic feelings had gotten out of hand. They claimed his actions were misguided rather than criminal. The evidence said otherwise. The jury convicted him on all charges: kidnapping, stalking, harassment, conspiracy to commit assault, and violation of a protective order. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison. During the sentencing hearing, I was allowed to give a victim impact statement. I looked directly at Dimitri as I spoke. "You told me once that great love requires great sacrifice," I said. "You were right. But the sacrifice wasn't supposed to be my freedom, my safety, or my peace of mind. The sacrifice was supposed to be your ego." When I said no, he stared back at me with the same intensity he'd always had, as if he still believed we were meant to be together. "Real love means wanting someone to be happy, even if that happiness doesn't include you," I continue. "What you felt for me was never love. It was ownership. It was control. It was violence disguised as devotion." The judge sentenced him to the maximum penalty allowed under state law. As they led him away, Dimitri turned back to me one last time. "This isn't over," he mouthed silently. Even in defeat, he couldn't let go of the fantasy. I finished college at a different university, with a new name and enhanced security protocols. Trevor and I never got back together. The trauma had changed both of us too much, but we remained friends. He went on to become a victims' rights advocate. Zara stayed my roommate and closest friend throughout the ordeal. She's the only person from that time who still knows where I live now. It's been 5 years since Dimitri was sentenced. I've built a new life in a different state, with a career I love and relationships based on mutual respect rather than obsession. But I still check the locks on my doors twice every night. I still feel nervous when someone knows too much about my schedule. I still catch myself scanning crowds for a familiar face that I hope never to see again, because I know that in 7 years, Dimitri will be eligible for parole, and I know that when he gets out, he'll still believe we're meant to be together. The thing I laughed off as a harmless crush turned into 2 years of terror and a lifetime of looking over my shoulder. I learned that harmless is often just evil that hasn't revealed its true nature yet. And I learned that sometimes the person who claims to love you most is actually the one you should fear the most.